Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Nation A's Comic Podcast. I'm one of our two hosts here. I'm Rodney Stewart. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Holding in there. It's starting to get quite chippy out here in Hawaii. We're hitting about 73 degrees, so starting to get cold here, man.
Oh, 73. Yeah, that's good. I think we hit a heat wave here. It's about 32 degrees, I think, right now. So that's our heat wave in the good old Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like as you see here at the bottom of our screen here, we have ourselves all over the internets. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, well, of course, YouTube if you're looking at the live stream, Facebook, and Instagram. And so we're gonna just go ahead and jump into it this week, and we're gonna first get started with all the things Disney Plus. So if you don't know and you've been hiding behind a rock, Disney Plus got started off this week on November 12th, and so far so good. So if you don't know, we have all of our Disney shows, we have Marvel, we have anything that is a property now owned by Disney. That's to include a lot of the TV series like the X-Men, the Simpsons, and a few others. And then we also got some new stuff. There's a one, like, I think, High School Musical Disney original, and we also have the Mandalorian, and we have a Marvel superhero show, but it's based off of your everyday people who are dealing with certain situations who are now living the life as a superhero. And then towards the end of that show, they get a comic book made off of themselves that is actually free. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things. But Disney Plus is here to stay right now at the minute. They're also offering a like a this nice little bundle package where you can go get ESPN Plus, you can get Hulu, and you can get Disney Plus, where I think is about $12.99. And I don't know, and Michael, maybe is it the commercial free version of Hulu, or is this the one with commercials?
So the yeah, so the package so the package is 12.99. I think it's 6.99 uh just with Disney Plus alone. From my understanding, the 6.99 and the 12.99 is for commercial free on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And then then later this year they're actually going to introduce another tier, a cheaper tier where it will have commercials in Disney Plus.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
as far as I know, the 12.99 for the package with Hulu um, still comes with the commercials.
Okay. Okay. So, Mike, why don't you go ahead and give us some of your initial thoughts from your time with Disney Plus? I know you told me during pre-production you've been pretty busy with this week, but with the time you have gotten with it, what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think we talked about last year with DC Universe how it was kind of slow rolling out the gate, and it was seemingly starting to get better with the addition of more comic books and better TV shows. With Disney Plus, however, they came rolling out the gate real fast with their lineup. There's a ton of movies, a ton of TV shows. They started their original programming with The Mandalorian. We're going to see a bunch of the Marvel stuff later this year, and I think the first one I believe is going to be the one with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, and actually, they just showed pictures of the Winter Soldier's new look and Agent uh, Carter's new look. So that's pretty exciting. My initial impressions so far, I know that at launch they had some issues with their servers and people trying to log in, but to be honest, that's to be expected. They've already topped what they initially thought was going to happen on their opening day of launch of Disney Plus. So, other than that, we got to watch the first episode of The Mandalorian. The second episode's actually out tonight or today, and it was everything that we thought it might be from a John Favreau production. So it was amazing. The TV shows, I got to delve into a little bit of them. X-Men did get into a little bit of that this week, so that was pretty cool to see to get back into that show because there's always the great debate which one was better, X-Men or Batman. And so I it's just awesome to see that show again. And then I got into Gargoyles. And originally I got back into watching Gargoyles because there was an article put out talking about how Disney Plus is going to air uh, the uncensored, uncut version of Gargoyles, which kind of made me start thinking like there was a censored version that we saw on the regular TV. So uh, this season or this series that they're putting out or putting back out onto Disney Plus is uncensored. It just and it's not anything crazy. It's just a little bit more edgier for what that time was back then. But from what I've seen, it looks pretty good. I saw a bunch of movies on there that I was very surprised to see. Flight of the Navigator, The Rocketeer. Uh, they don't have everything out right now. So like if you try to we tried to look up Maleficent, it's in the library. It's shown in the library, but it actually doesn't come out until October of next
Yeah,
year.
I looked up John
Uh,
Carter last night because I don't know. I've always liked that movie, and it's not available until May 1st, 2020. So yeah, there's definitely a few
right.
things that still aren't out there yet for
So,
consumption.
and with that said, it's still a huge library to explore. Still a ton of movies that I know me and the family are going to watch and see. So I'm pretty excited for it. I'm more excited though for The Mandalorian and then the Marvel shows that are going to come after that. Because if the Marvel shows are anywhere near what that Mandalorian what is, then it's completely worth it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was cool to take a trip down memory lane, and was kind of funny is I was totally taken back still, even though I kind of remembered that Disney owned the majority of these movies. I was still taken aback to see just how much TV and movies that Disney owned when it's all just sitting there under one place instead of you having to hunt down 18 different streaming services to see it all. But
Right.
like for example, the only thing that kind of hurt my heart a little bit is that even though they have Spider-Man the animated series, they don't have, from what it looks like right now, season one through let's say three or four. They only had like one of the final seasons of it
Hmm.
when Venom was on the show. Now, of course, that's going to probably change later, but it is what it is. The other cool thing is they didn't put too much on that front page to make everything congested. I like how they have their sorting system. Like, hey, here you go, A through Z. Here's all your series and all this other stuff. They didn't make it super confusing for me to look at stuff. I know it's a little bit now. With that being said, it's a little bit different when we're talking about Netflix and then we're talking about Disney because Disney is just going to qualify everything as animation. There's no anime. There's no cyberpunk. There's no futuristic. We're kind of like Netflix gets into all these niches and putting all these other different categories in there to that they have to put like these subgenres, not only just the main genre of particular movies and TV shows. But I still like how Disney laid it out. It's not congested right now. They didn't put too much on the screen. Me and Mike, I know we've talked before in terms of how Amazon Prime, Hulu, and Netflix just has all this stuff jumbled into one, making it quite difficult to find stuff. But it felt flawless. Like I was looking for movies for my kids, and you're just able to just easily scroll down and see all of that stuff. So that was kind of cool to you know get introduce my daughter to Bambi, introduce my kids. I don't think they ever seen Toy Story, so they got to get
Hmm.
introduced to Toy Story and to a few others. Before they only get introduced to what they saw on Netflix, but now having this whole catalog. Plus, that kind of eases up my wallet a bit because I was buying a lot of Disney stuff on Apple TV. And if you don't know, Disney is by far one of the most stubborn companies for putting anything on sale. The only company that comes remotely close to Disney is probably Nintendo, because you buy Switch
Right. They
game.
play things pretty close to the vest. They don't
Yeah,
let their IPs or their licenses out so
yep.
much. So,
And I
yeah.
was gonna say, and then you remember how the Switch is. I mean, hell, Super Mario Brothers Odyssey is still going for $60, and we already
Right.
two,
Yeah.
3 years in. So
Right.
but super excited. I'm really looking forward to what I'm seeing from this series. It's just pretty cool. So I can't wait for more. Any last thoughts you have on Disney before we move on?
I think the only gripes that I have, and they're very small, they aren't deal breakers. I did notice, like you said, the menu system is very simple. That's very appreciated. Uh, but I did notice that, so say like you're watching a TV show, there's no continued watching section yet.
There's no what
Or
now?
if you're watching a movie, like a continued watching
Oh,
section.
okay, got you, got you.
So like if you're watching like Netflix or Hulu, they always have a section that says continue watching whatever you were previously watching. And so they don't have that yet. Kind of the workaround to that is just to add that show or that movie to your favorites,
Mm.
and just go back to it there. But they just don't have that feature yet. I'd imagine the more people notice that and gripe about it, Disney will add that in. And then the other thing, and this hasn't affected me, and I don't know about you, Rodney. I stream Disney Plus on my Fire Stick,
Mm-hmm.
my Amazon Fire Stick. I know there was an article out there talking about, I want to say it's Vizio. There are certain Vizio or other smart TVs that are not able to download Disney Plus yet. And that's, I believe, I can't remember what the timeline is, but it's sometime in 2020 where it'll be made available to those smart TVs. I want to say it's the Vizio smart TVs, but which is kind of a letdown because Vizio is a very popular brand and very well respected TV brand. And if you're an owner of that, you're probably pretty disappointed that you can't get Disney Plus right now. And you might, and if it were me, I might have to suck it up for a little bit, and I might even buy like a Chromecast or a Fire Stick real quick just to get that app on there. But other than that, I have it. I love what they're doing so far. I hope that uh, when the Marvel shows come out, that they'll be just as good as what we've seen so far with the Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's a good thing you mentioned. And you know what? That's actually one of the things I'm happy about. Every time we've seen another rollout, even like with this, DC Universe and a few other things, it took forever for the app to come to Apple TV or Fire Stick or all these other things. So even though you were excited to watch it, you didn't want to watch it on your actual computer. You want to be able to do other things. And so it was cool that I think the Amazon Fire Stick has it, the Apple TV has it, and yes, you're right. If it's not on Vizio right now, that is a big deal breaker as of the moment. But they definitely hit a lot of categories to start off. So I'm kind of really impressed with Disney with that. So I know we'll be
Yeah, so it does look like real quick. It is the Vizio smart TVs.
okay.
It does. So if you have a Vizio smart TV, you might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that somebody's probably found a way. As far as right now, they went and got a Fire Stick or something, just to get it out the way. Because I must admit, this release has been pretty big this week. I thought that that I knew it was going to get some play, but I didn't think it was going to get this much. But that plus the Mandalorian hitting some amazing numbers, it's definitely a good start. All right, so let's go into our next topic real quick, and we've talked about this before, but we're just gonna graze over this real quick. The Joker is getting ready to hit 1 billion at the global box office, and what I didn't know about this is that this is the first time that a rated R movie is about to hit 1 billion. I thought Deadpool had already achieved that goal, but I was sadly mistaken, and so now the Joker has is I guess it's within a couple days soon they'll be hitting that goal. The article that I have here says, according to Deadline, the Joker will be the first rated R movie to pass 1 billion in global earnings, the seventh film from Warner Brothers to hit that mark, the fourth DC film after Aquaman, The Dark Knight Rises, and The Dark Knight to earn 1 billion. Deadline reports the film's box office take through Thursday, November 14th, as 999.1 million, with 317 of that from domestic markets. I don't know what to say. You know what? We're hearing. You know what's so weird is that we know about these global markets, and well, I mean, it's kind of weird how I'm saying this, but the the global markets have really made or break films a lot recently. When I was first growing up, the only way that films were kind of that were kind of qualified is basically only in the domestic market. But now, like, I give you a prime example. Venom came out, And even though it did okay in the United States, Russia loved that movie so much that it put that movie almost close to $1 billion itself. Then you had another movie that comes to mind is um, Live, Die, Repeat, I believe it is. Or they called it Die Another Day. It was that Tom Cruise movie. It didn't do fairly well in the United States, but the domestic markets loved that movie. And I'm not gonna lie, I love that movie too. But it didn't do the numbers that it was supposed to do in the domestic market, but it did great overseas. And I even think World War Z is the same way too. But now you have the Joker here about to hit $1 billion for rated R films. So I'm sure that just like anything else, a lot of people are going to look at properties that they can take in a property like or a comic book property that would they would maybe think about making PG before make it rated R and see if maybe they can possibly hit this number. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this does wonders for rated R movies, and like you said, people who want to do a comic book movie that is more mature, more leaning towards that R rating can actually make those movies now. They're a little bit more justified in making those movies now. I'm sure your boy McFarlane is wondering where was this fanfare when he came out with Spawn the
Yeah.
first time,
Hmm.
because if he had come out with Spawn, like if he had pitched an idea and people were like, okay, let's do it during this time, I imagine Spawn would do very well.
It's funny to say this. This was
Now,
Spawn is a it came out before its generation in turn. It came out at
yeah,
the wrong
absolutely,
time. If it came out
yeah,
around this
absolutely,
time, it'd be a masterpiece.
yeah, absolutely. So I think that what you're getting with and this is the other thing too. So you had Deadpool that made a ton of money, but it was a movie that was well taken care of. It was a movie that where the bigwigs didn't get too involved in, and I think that's what you're seeing here with Joker as well, when you just let the director and the actors and the writers just do their thing without being stepped on by whatever producers or executive producers are trying to nitpick and be like, oh, I don't think that should be in here. Oh, I don't think that should be in here. I think that if you just let the artists do their thing, you're gonna get your money. And I think that when you've got Deadpool now, and now you've got or both Deadpool movies, and now you've got this Joker movie. I think that this only does well for an industry that is looking to be edgier. And and I still unfortunately have not seen this movie, but from all accounts, it was very well done. And so why not? Why not have some more out there? Of course, you're gonna have people push back or whatever, but the numbers speak for themselves. It, Joker did over 300 million domestically, and then another six internationally. So people will watch, and as long as it's done well, I mean that kind of money isn't coming on the first, the second, or the third weekend. That's not just first timers. That's people coming back. That's people recommending it to other people. Yo, you should definitely check out Joker. Okay, not just because it's a Joker movie, a comic book movie. It's because it was a really well done movie with a comic book character, and it was something that people. I mean, I've heard people go into it like, okay, they were thinking it was going to be like a Jack Nicholson, type of Joker, or even like a Heath Ledger type of Joker, and then coming out of it and being like, that was not what we expected, and then going, but we really liked it. We really thought it was good. So, it's a great success and tribute to that team that created that movie, and kudos to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Kudos to them. I'm already hearing rumblings that there might be a sequel. I'm curious to see if that gets pushed off the ground. But I still would probably still say I would love for it to stay. And I think we had this conversation before. I would love for it to stay separate from the rest of that DC universe. I think it's great in its own piece, and I think maybe tying it to something else might not give it the appeal it deserves. Or if you have to do it, I would do it the McFarlane route, where there's very little Batman and it's still Joker as the centerpiece to that movie. But we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think that especially with what's happened in DC Comics right now, where you've got all these different stories, especially with like the deceased storyline, and then you've got the dark multiverse that don't really tie into the continuity. These are just like one shots. It, I think that you can get away with doing that with these DC movies, and I think that's what they should do. Have this Joaquin Phoenix Joker be his own Joker in his own universe. And then and keep it like that. And then if at some point in time that you think it might be a good idea, you can bring him in some, weird way or whatever. But I think for right now, I think it's just fine having it be his own standalone universe without having to worry about tying into any of the other movies that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing we're gonna go into, Mike, we're gonna go into something that's near and dear to your heart, and I found it the last minutes before we got started with this show, and it's a farewell letter by your boy Jason Aaron as he is getting ready to depart the Thor series. And so I found this article here on Newsarama, and for those who don't know, Jason Aaron started his run on Thor 6 years ago, and now he's coming to an end next month with King of Thor #4. And so Jason Aaron took it upon himself to write and nothing wrong with this. He wrote a farewell letter to the fans for his time on Thor. So let's get you a little excerpt here. Thor is truly the sort of god, or gods, I guess, as I write a whole bunch of Thors, that I would like to believe in, writes Aaron. The guy who wakes up every single day and looks at the hammer with its worthiness enchantment and doesn't know if he or she will be able to lift it. Who lives every day questioning their own worthiness, expiring for it, while also embracing their unworthiness, their failings. The kind of God who delights and takes unbridled joy from the wild, unimaginable beauty all around them. A God who sometimes drinks too much, sometimes loves too recklessly, who thinks both too highly and too lowly of themselves, who laughs big, weeps bigger, who thunder and broads and feels things deeply. Even through near impenetrable flesh, who would die 1,000 times to save the most precious thing to him, which is us. Mike, I know that Thor, the Jason Aaron run in Thor series has meant a lot to you, so I'm gonna let you start this conversation first, and then I will go in second into it.
Yeah, Jason Aaron, I didn't give two, studs about Thor, reading Thor at all. Just was not a character that I was ever interested in reading. Um, I think when you have the Thor movies, I got a little bit more interested, but to me, they were still the weaker movies of, Captain America and Iron Man and the Avengers. It wasn't really until Thor Ragnarok where I was like, man, this is a really good Thor movie. So, and I was like, all right, cool. Thor's, getting pretty cool. And then even then, I didn't even think about picking up a Thor comic until I saw Jane Foster's Thor. And, I started kind of reading that, but I, didn't realize that was not the beginning of Jason Aaron's run. So, fast forward a few more years later, up to now, really, especially over the summer, I really, delved deep into that comic book run. And it's just been an amazing run. I still haven't even finished it. I haven't even gotten through the War of the Realms or King Thor. And so, and it's not even just, and it's really not even just Thor. It's he's had his Loki titles and everything that belongs to that whole Asgard mythos. So, Jason Aaron just one of those rare talents that you can have people who make good runs, start new characters, revive characters. You've got people like Jeff Johns, who's done a great job over in DC. Did a great job with Green Lantern. Green Lantern was another character I just didn't really care about, and when we read him last year, through Blackest Night, it was just it was amazing. You got people like Jonathan Hickman, who's had his runs either with Fantastic Four or Secret Wars, what have you. Brian Michael Bendis, Jeff Lemire, all these cats, all very talented. But when you're talking about somebody like, all right, and then I'm sorry, you even put in uh, I Chris Claremont in there with X-Men, just incredible talents. But when you talk about Jason Aaron, that it was something different about this run. Something different. Yeah, Chris Claremont had, the X-Men and, it was kind of like a daytime soap opera. Jonathan Hickman, who is somebody I really love as well. Uh, but the way he does his style compared to how Jason Aaron does his style, it's completely different. And I love Jason Aaron of how he can develop a character and tell a story over a long period of time. Like he's got this so well thought out. Okay. Whereas Jonathan Hickman, he's all about that big picture. Okay. He gives you a lot in the beginning. You're not sure what's going on, and he finds a way to tie it in together towards the end. Whereas Jason Aaron brings you on this journey of Thor. People were freaking out when they had Jane Foster in there as Thor. Who's this female? And he said in his letters after each book, is like, yo, just stick with me. This is not like me replacing Thor. This is just Thor going through some stuff. This is Odin's son going through some stuff. Thor is just the mantle. Okay, it's Odin's son that's the character, and we get to see this journey of somebody like you said, Roddy, or when you were reading that excerpt of someone who is either very confident in himself or not. Somebody who has his demons, and somebody who is just can be a very loving and honorable person. And it wasn't always just about smashing stuff. It was really, trying to find out who is Odin's son, and what is his role at large within the Marvel universe. So I love Jason Aaron. I hate that this run is ending. Whoever picks up Thor after that has some big shoes to fill. But to be honest with you, I would be fine. I mean, if it bombed after that, I would be fine with that because Jason Aaron's run was just that amazing. And I mean that's a whole story that could just be self-contained by itself in a novel. So I think that whatever else he touches next is going to be gold. It's just like Hickman. When Hickman was announced that he was going to start putting his hands on X-Men, everybody knew it was going to be gold. Nobody read it, but everybody knew it was going to be gold. And then when it came out, of course, the reviews and the ratings were super high. And I think that's what's going to happen with Jason Aaron to whatever project he moves on to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 3 or 4 people right now that I know that no matter what they write, um, I know I'm already in just because of the folks attached. That be Scott Snyder, Jason Aaron, uh, now the Jonathan Hickman and Rick Remender, excuse me. For those guys, anything that comes out from them, I know is going through. And then I have other people like Robert Kirkman also on there as well. I just enjoy some of the stuff they write. Jason Aaron's run on Thor was pretty potent for me because it took me back to that book. Plus, they did a phenomenal job pairing him up with some amazing art in terms of you had Jason Aaron and you had Isaiah Ribic on I believe it was God of Thor, and then you had I think Dave Marquez or was Russell Dauterman who did the one with Jane Foster, and I haven't kept up with the other ones yet. I haven't read them yet, but because of that, it just brings the whole aura of Thor together. And for once again another character, even with the movies, who I didn't really care too much for, except for three, to even get back into that series and start reading it again. I don't know what it is. Like I love Greek mythology, but I've always been one of those that it's not necessarily the visual. So I could look at like novels, maybe a couple movies and stuff like that. But Thor never really did it for me. But some reason Jason Aaron's Thor run was able to kind of pull me back in, and so I'm very delightful with. I'm looking for what he does next. I don't know if he's going the indie route or if he's staying with Marvel, but be very curious to see what he does later on down the road. But cheers to you, Jason Aaron. Looking forward to whatever you have to come. in the near future. So we have quite a few indie books this week, so we're just going to go ahead and jump into those. Mike, I'm going to let you start first, or if you would prefer, I can go first. It's up to you. And
No, I can go first. I think you went first last time, so I'll we can switch it up. It's
Okay.
cool. I
Is there a
got you.
particular book you would like to start off with?
Yeah, let's start off with the Underwater Welder.
Okay.
Um, much like you, I try to pick my books based off of the artwork on the cover, and sort of what the summary is that they give for this book. And so this is so what's and actually when I saw who was writing this book, I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to get this. So it is written by Jeff Lemire, art's done by Jeff Lemire, letters done by Steve Wands. Uh, Jeff Lemire has put out a ton of stuff. One of his most notable, especially Marvel runs, was with your boy Moon Knight. And what was what set that run apart from all other writers that have done Moon Knight was that he really dived into the psychology of that character, especially because he seems to have almost like split personality disorder. And other writers have done this too. It's a symptom of Moon Knight's character, but no one really dived deep into it. And the way he did, you didn't know if this guy was crazy or if he was sane and somebody was just messing with him. And so when I read this book and I read what it was going to be about, and everybody talked about it was going to be something like a Twilight Zone with some kind of supernatural undertones. So I was really into that. And the this book centers on a guy named Jack Joseph, and he goes through an experience where he finds he's a diver, he's a welder in Nova Scotia, Canada, which is way far north. It's up above Boston and Maryland. I used to go there a lot. Super cold, super wintry. But he was a deep sea diver for an oil rig, and he happens upon a watch, and he goes through this whole weird experience. And as I'm reading this book, I'm starting to realize, man, this is not a sci-fi type of book. It really is more of a Twilight Zone type of an episode. I mean, it could literally be done as a Twilight episode. And the way the art was done, initially the art really threw me off because the way that, the cover is in color, but the actual art in the book, there is no color. It's just pencils. And so that kind of threw me off at first. And I sometimes I feel like depending on what the story is, I feel like it's very lazy art and it doesn't make any sense to the story. The most notable one I can think of is that story we read last year with aliens, and it was probably the worst book I've ever read uh, in my life.
Alien Rising or something like that with Sam
Yeah, it
Keith
was.
on the art. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was just a terrible, terrible book, and I immediately thought of that when I opened this book, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be just like that, but it wasn't. So yes, there's no color in this book, but the way that like an old school black and white Twilight Zone episode. And at first, it kind of seems like it is a supernatural type of thing. He finds this watch, he's going through some weird things, it's having an effect on his relationship with his wife, who's about to give birth. And when you go through the story, you start to find out things about him and about his father that he lost when he was a child. And you start to realize, it doesn't really have to do so much with the supernatural, but it has to deal with him coming to terms of what happened to his father. And that to me was super crazy because by the time I was done with this book, I started to realize I just lost my camera, but hopefully I'm still on mic.
You're still on microphone.
All
We can
right.
hear you.
So what I started to realize was that it's not just about just to watch. It's about him and trying to come to terms with how his father died and why he died, and him coming to terms with how to reconcile that issue and move on with his life. And by the time you get to the end, it's a very satisfying ending, and you come out of it thinking like, am I hearing the Twilight Zone soundtrack? The doo 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 doo, because it was crazy. It was a trip. Um, so to me, it was a very good book. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if you got a chance to read it, Rodney, but it was something
Oh
that
yeah.
I would absolutely recommend to anybody. It's not there's not a lot of action in there. The only action is, there are times where the diver, he is being pulled out to sea a couple of times. But for the most part, it's really about this guy who may be losing his mind or may not be losing his mind. And there's a switch from, he goes into these moments where he's talking or hearing things, and it switches to him being a child. And he's switching back to being an adult and to being a child. And he's starting to remember things ever so slightly. And you start to find out what happened and why it happened, and you're like, oh snap. And it's really good. I mean, this is something that could be, like I said, a Twilight Zone type of episode, or even like almost like a made for TV movie that you watch on the weekends.
I was gonna say I think that's what made that cream of the crop when it comes to this book. I think I was in the same thing. I was taken aback by the art initially because one, it was Jeff Lemire, who I won't say I've never really seen him draw anything stylized or anything, but his art fit this book to go with his writing. And initially, I didn't know what to expect from this book, but uh, I saw what, oddly enough, as I continued to read this book, I saw a lot of myself in the book, and not necessarily when I say that I'm talking about just all of my personal issues, but just even some of the personal issues someone in my family might deal with. I was able to kind of take from certain pages of this book. And then some of the things like there's some things that you feel like you can't let go until you get some closure. I felt like that was another good point. The main character and the things he dealt with his father and the promises and all this other stuff. Me and my father have not always been on the best of terms at times, and so when I saw some of those things, I was able to relate. The book had so much more relatability to me than I thought when I initially, because it wasn't only just the art that at first was getting me out of it. I don't know what it is, but I'm not necessarily the let's do this at water type guy when it comes to books. So, sometimes that normally draws me out of a book when someone says they're a diver or a pirate. If there's not a certain person who's writing Namor or Aquaman, I don't want to read it because of the fact that it's based out in the water. And I don't know. For some reason, I feel like that's boring. But when I read this and then just saw some of the things in the cues that he took and stuff like that. I got a lot out of this book, and especially the pocket watch moment for me. That was a very big turning point of just some of the things that you don't necessarily remember as an adult, but something that happened as a kid, and then eventually, sometime during your time as an adult, you get triggered by that memory out of nowhere. You're like, you know what? That did happen. I don't know why in the world I sealed it after all these years, but I really enjoyed this book. I think I went in there kind of like you. I was like, well, I'm gonna go ahead and try to make it through the book. And then as I got further through it, um, you know what, Mike? And I don't know if you remember this point. That book was 200 pages, but it sure didn't feel like it. And I felt like it
No.
was an easy read. I felt like I was able to, and not only with it being an easy read, I was able to get so much out of that book in just a short amount of time. So, kudos to Jeff Lemire. That was a phenomenal book. It makes me definitely. I love stories of the mind at times, and I think this was a great one.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it was 250-page book, and it didn't feel like it. I think the way the panels, that was another thing that I was really impressed with. The way the panels were laid out in this book, and a lot of them were just straight art and leading you into like the next scene,
Yeah.
where either he is passed out and he's waking up to his father or to his mother, or just coming to when he's back on land and there's nobody around. Or he's one of the parts that kind of freaked me out was there's a scene where he is back on land at one point in time and everybody's gone, and he thinks
Mm-hmm.
that he's wished everybody away because he wants to be alone. He thinks that's what he wants, and that's when you really start to get into what's going on with his family. And there's a point where he decides, you know what, I should have left. I should have never came back to this place. And he tries to leave, and
Yeah.
he drives by a sign that says, leaving, Nova Scotia, and he keeps driving, and then he comes up on the sign again, and he's like, "What?" And then he floors it, and he keeps driving by the sign like he can't get away, and that's when you start thinking like, "Yo, what is going on?" And it's a metaphorical like, hey, no, you need to deal with this issue. You need to come to terms with what's going on, and uh, the way that he does it, is amazing because he at one point in time towards the end, it's his adult self talking to his child self,
Mm-hmm.
and they discover what happened and why it happened. That it was like, whoa, that was insane. And like I said, the way it ended, I was very satisfied. It is a Jeff Lemire comic. If you've read anything about Jeff Lemire, this is the kind of stuff that he does. He's got a very like psychological approach to his characters. And
This ain't a Jim Lee book, kids. This is
no,
not a
no,
Jim Lee
this is
book.
yeah, this is not a book where it's panels of action and this and that or whatever. It's like, and with that even said, like you said, this is over 200 pages. With that said, it's not extremely wordy,
No.
and the conversations are very real.
Mm-hmm.
It's conversations that you might, like you said, you might have with your father or somebody else might have with theirs. And not even just with their father, but with their wife or their mother or whoever else that they were talking to, just like Jack Joseph was talking to in this book.
I
And
was resonating with the wife parts too, because
oh
there's been
yeah,
many times where my wife has told me, get your shit together, and and
right,
it takes me a while to jumpstart at times. So that was
right.
definitely a very telling part too.
Yeah, and it's funny because I felt the same way. I felt the same way, and I was like, ooh, you know what? When I get home, I'm gonna do something a little bit different because I don't want to have this happen to me.
Yes, absolutely.
So I thought it was a great book. It's not like you said, Roddy. It's not a die hard actiony type book. They kind of build it in a summary as somewhat of a supernatural type thing. I really don't think it was a supernatural book at all. I think it was just more of a psychological thriller of a guy coming to terms with him seeing an object and basically being I don't want to say mind tricked, but he's starting to remember things, and or he had that object trigger something in his
Hmm.
head that's forcing him to come to terms with what happened to his father and why
Yeah.
he is the way he is. So I think with that said, the next book is almost the complete opposite. Um, if you are looking for an actiony, straight up sci-fi type of thriller, uh, Eight Outcast Volume One is that type of book. Um, and this book is written by Mike Johnson and Raphael Albuquerque. Mike, the guy who had a run on, and Raphael had a run on American Vampire. And then the art is also done by Raphael Albuquerque. And it's something that we typically see with these indie comics, uh, especially if they're with a lesser known publisher. They're gonna have an artist that is usually the artist is that person writing that book, and it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. To me, it doesn't have to be like on the level of say like a Sajad Shah or something like that, as long as it translates well with the story in the moment. And so, unlike Underwater Welder, like I said, this is more of an action type story, and this is centered around a character named Joshua. And from what we know, Joshua is this guy who is put into a situation where he is given a mission and seemingly going back in time to kill a certain person. And from what it looks like, it's some kind of Nazi. You don't know what it is or what this guy has done initially. You're given a little bit of breadcrumbs to kind of figure out that story, but uh, something goes horribly wrong. And it's an adventure of not just him, but people that he meets along the way. And the way they laid his book out is kind of interesting. I think one of the first pages tells you uh, how the artwork is in the background. Okay, there's different colors. I think purple is the present. So everything with a purple background is the present time. Everything with a green background is the past. Everything with a blue background is the future. And then they have everything with an orange background is called the merge, I believe, or the
The
meld,
meld, the
the
meld.
meld, and it's whatever the heck that place is. And so when you're going through this, yes, sometimes they give you a date and time of whatever, but you know exactly what's going on at this point, certain point in time in the story. And so it's an adventure. It's a straight up uh time sci-fi time adventure. You know, it's almost like I don't know if you've ever seen the show, Rodney, but there's a TV show called Fringe.
Yep,
And one
one of
of
my
the main
favorites.
plots of Fringe was that there are these people that can watch time or they observe time. Okay. And time to them is not linear. Okay. So they can observe time. And the way that they explain it in the show is almost how they explain it in this book. And that it's just this big river that can be observed um, at any point in time. And so uh, instead of having observers, you have basically these chrononauts, and you have what they're trying to. It seems like there's a struggle. There's a struggle to gain control over time, and to do that, they have to gain control over the meld. And the meld is this seemingly wasteland type of area where every aspect of time, whether it's the past, future, or present, gets there's certain parts of it that get washed away into the meld, and it's just made up comprised of people for the most part that have come from either the past, the future, the present, with people that have also been born in the meld, and it's just huge, huge adventure. And I really enjoyed this book. It was a welcome pace. So I read The Underwater Welder first, very satisfied and thrilled, and then it was like straight into this action. Okay, it's a guy who is making a deal with some kind of scientist, and he gets put into this machine. They're like, okay, if you do this, we're gonna take care of your wife, and they send him off, and he's automatically in the meld where he's not supposed to be, and he's immediately attacked. He's got an arrow through his leg. He's trying to figure out what the heck is going on. He's actually kind of lost his memory to a certain degree, and he's trying to piece together what's going on. And then you have some explanations throughout this story of the different characters, the protagonists, the antagonists, and what their roles are. And I
You know
gotta
what,
say,
Micah? Not to cut you off, but I will say the interesting thing for me was that it took me like the fourth issue to realize that it was this book was about time and not just like going to other dimensions.
oh,
Because when they started talking about the meld and they were and the lady I can't recall her name was saying follow the dinosaur, and then I was like okay, I think they're in the past, but then I was kind of questioning why we had these particular structures in their portion of the past. But
hmm
then, as I started to read it more and got a better understanding, um, then I started to understand why this was a time adventure. Um, I will say, just kind of like Game of Thrones, when you watch someone like Ramsay die, I even though he was only there for a short amount of time, no satisfying feeling than what happened to the king.
right, yeah, yeah.
And and then other than that, the the meld and the well, let's put it this way. I'm very curious to read volume two because I believe this is an ongoing series, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And like you said, I'm totally excited to read the second volume because the way that they set this up, um, it's very interesting. And seemingly everything's going on at the same time, just in different time periods. And it's really, the way that they put it all together was great. And I wasn't sure about the artwork at first. I understood what they were trying to do with the different colors of the backgrounds, but the more I read it, the more I was like, "Oh, snap, we're in green."
Yeah, I did. You know
We're in
what?
the past.
I hate to say I'd ignored that part at the beginning, and then it wasn't until you just start breaking it down to me that it started to all come together. But before I
Hmm.
was just like, what? Where are we? And then, but now that you said that part, that makes so much sense. So
Yeah, yeah, it was a good book. The first five issues were very, very well done. It's things like this that are very satisfying because you never know what you're gonna get with an indie book. Sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're just really bad. I go back to that Aliens one that we read last year, and so I always get nervous. I was very nervous for both of these. The artwork and obviously I knew who Jeff Lemire was. I'm not very familiar with Mike Johnson or Raphael Albuquerque, but uh, I think that you see a lot of this, with and I think I read this with Jeff Lemire at the end of his book was that it took him a long time to write the Underwater Welder because he was working on so many other. He was actually working on DC titles at the time, and he was working on the new 52, and you start to really think and have an appreciation for. We talked about Jason Aaron, and Jonathan Hickman, and they all do indie comics, stuff that they're really into, that they know that's never going to get published on DC or Marvel.
yeah, Raphael
And
Albuquerque did a lot of stuff. I don't know if you've seen those uh those Archie comics, not the normal ones, but the ones where they're it's kind of like the I think it's the Death of Archie. I can't remember the
oh
titles
yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Raphael Albuquerque did a lot of the covers for those, and I think he
Okay.
drew the initial series, or the initial iteration of that. But yeah, Raphael Albuquerque's a beast when it comes to art. So I was kind of shocked to see that he has his own series out there, something outside of horror, because he does a phenomenal job with that. But yeah, I can't wait to read volume two, man. We'll definitely have to get on here and talk about it eventually.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
All right, so I guess I'm up to the plate. Let's start off with some nostalgia first. And we're going to start off here with Robotech Volume 1 Countdown. Brought to you by the good folks at Titan Comics. Written by Brian Wood. Art by Marco Torrini. Colors by Marco Lesko and John Charles. With Tony Holdsworth. And letters by John Workman. All right. So like I was saying, the nostalgia of watching Gargoyles, X-Men animated, and a few others. When me and Michael were deciding books this week, I know I had to go with a particular book, and that book had to be Robotech. As I was looking for titles for us to talk about on an indie level, and so for me, Robotech has been a part of my childhood. I remember every time I used to go to Michael's house or to my auntie Rosalind's house, we used to go to we used to go to the rental store. In Michael's neck of the woods, it was Blockbuster Video. In our neck of the woods, I think it was Hollywood Video, or maybe it'd be the underground place and all that other stuff. What's up, fam? Gonna say what's up to Leandre because he's finally checking us out. Hope to have him as a guest on the show eventually. What's going on, Dre? Thanks for subscribing. Why don't you throw $200 into our donation as well if you have opportunity? And then also, I guess I'll give a shameless plug too. If you want to check out some sports talk in the Virginia area, he does local and he does nationwide. Make sure to check out the Facilitator podcast. They also have a live stream that takes place on Facebook. So, Dre, if you get an opportunity, please put a link or something in the comments for those who can see it. And then also, Dre, I'm looking forward to hearing your take on Miles Garrett when the time comes. But I digress and get back to Robotech here. But Robotech has been one of those cool things for me because I'm a sucker for robots. I love Transformers. I love the GoBots. I love every anime dealing with mech like Gundam and stuff like that. And Robotech has been one of those series, which was a property done by Harmony Gold. Also, times have kind of changed. You have Robotech and you have Macross. Robotech is what was brought to the United States when they were introducing Robotech. What they did was is they bought Super Dimensional Fortress and two other series and then turned it into a full 85 episode series for the toy line and all those other things. The great late Carl Masek was a part of that. And then in Japan, you had Macross, which was only 36 episodes, and then you had two other series. So
Hmm.
I'm going to tell the truth. After those 36 episodes, Robotech wasn't that great for me. Now, with that being said, I've watched the second and the third one. I need to watch it again as an adult, and maybe I'll make a video about it. But for me, they just didn't have the same allure as the initial 36 episodes. And then the further iterations, if you don't know, in Japan, a lot of these pop singers, J-pop singers, get put on to particular TV shows. Macross is very heavy on singing because of a particular part of the storyline, and so the other iterations of Macross, aka Robotech, haven't been as great. So to kind of go back into that storyline of Robotech, it's been one of the things I've been super interested in doing. And so first, let me start off with kudos to Brian Wood. If you don't know who Brian Wood is, before I talk about all the horrible things he's done, one of the good things that he used to do back in the days, he used to write all these amazing works, and one of them that we read back in the day was Starve, and now he's doing Robotech. Unfortunately, due to some allegations, I don't think he'll be riding Robotech much longer in the
Uh-oh.
foreseeable future.
Oh boy.
From my understanding, he was a big of a pest at conventions when it came to other female creators. But
Mm.
you guys can look that up for yourself. But let's just talk about the work right now. So um, if you don't remember, we're brought to this world where you have Rick Hunter, Roy Falker, Lisa. It's not Lisa Hunter, but you have Lisa, and then you have
Min-May.
Min May, and you have Captain Global. And
Yep.
so now that we're in 2019, you can't make it seem just like it did back in the 80s. So a lot of things have been changed. So we don't have the hyper Chinese Lin Min May. We have a more of a fighter type of Lin Min May. Rick Hunter looks completely different, and these are a lot of things that took me back. Kind of took me out the book for a little bit, just because I'm an '80s kid, so for me, reading this Robotech thing felt completely different, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I like this at the beginning. But then, as I saw the changes that they were making for a new audience and things like that, I was kind of cool with it, because some of those things that were a little silly, and I mean, let's be clear, it was a Saturday morning cartoon, so I'm not gonna put a lot of pressure on that. But once again, when you're trying to now bring that out, you have to change a couple things. So that initial sequence when Rick Hunter crashes his gear walk into, or his jet plane into the city, that whole scene from the comic book to the cartoon is completely different, but it's done well for a new and improved audience, and that's one of the things. But what I'm totally looking for is, and so let me just go ahead and say, I definitely recommend reading Volume One. I think it was a great read. I enjoyed it. The art took a little bit getting used to, but the art was great. But I'm looking forward to seeing what happens after episode 36 in the television series, and then now it's up to them to write the future. Um,
Right.
what?
So here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this an exact retelling
No.
of the Robotech show?
So as far as the main storyline, yes. As far as the little intricacies, some of those things have changed. In terms of, you remember, I don't know if you remember the doctor that helped build the shield for SDF-1. We're
Hmm.
getting a little bit more about him. We're getting a little bit more about Claudia and Roy. We're getting a little bit more about Roy than we did before. Um, they treat Rick Hunter when he first comes to a military ground a whole lot better in the show. You remember he came into the show was just like, "Hey, I'm landing anywhere I want to on a military installation." We know that's not going to happen. He's arrested. He's arrested within the first 10 seconds when he lands in the
Right,
comic
right,
book. So those little pieces have changed, but it's not a this complete retelling. Like basically that Brian Wood turned on an episode and then wrote a script for an artist. So you can tell that some things have changed. Um, Rick Hunter's bummy ship, they've destroyed it within the first 10 seconds, and then just gave him and had him pilot a fighter jet early. So that was interesting. I will say they did kind of speed through how Macross City or Macross Island ended up into SDF 1, but they're kind of still following the timeline of the episodes of the TV show. But like I said, once again, when we get to issue 37, I want to see what they can do to give me more of that, because I miss finding out what happened to Rick Hunter. And I don't know if you remember, Harmony Gold came out with a movie called Shadow Hunters or something like that a
yep,
couple years ago, in an attempt to kind of say, hey, this is where Rick Hunter's at these days. And after a while, I was kind of like, nope, that's not popping. This is totally off. And it just was a sign of the time. They just threw something out there, and it just wasn't the greatest. And so I don't need it to be spot on everything, but I needed to at least give me some understand what happened to this crew after the SDF one got destroyed in that last battle and things
right.
like that. But if you get an opportunity, please come check out Robotech from Titan Comics. I think they're on like issue 17 now or something like that. When I went to the LCS, I went and checked it out. So I'm hoping that it's selling well, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. All right, so let's get to our next book here, and we're gonna get to a singular issue of where are you in my thing here? Quarter Killer, and Quarter Killer is a Comixology original. And what put me towards this book was it was written by Vita Ayala. She's based out of New York. And she's also been drawing a particular series with my boy Bishop from Marvel Comics called Prisoner X. And I've been kind of following her career a bit. She's going to be doing the new Morbius Vampire Hunter or whatever series for Marvel coming soon. She does a lot of indie stuff. So I decided to give this try. I haven't given anything from Comixology Unlimited a try yet. So I decided to give this one a try. One of the cool things I liked about so first, excuse me, let me go back and just say written by Vita Ayala and Danny Lore, pencils and colors by Jamie Jones, inks by Stefano Gaudiano, edits by Adrian Lopez, and logo by Tim Daniel. Why did I like this? Why did I go for this book? The cover, duh, because it had an arcade machine on the front of it. So for a retro baby like me, I was like, yeah, let's see what this is about. And so I want to say that this book is a bit like The Matrix in the sense that we're in a future now where cash is no longer used. You even having coins won't even allow you to purchase anything. And so since this is only the first issue, we only get this build up. We don't get too much into the story. And one of the things for that is that we have this little girl. Her father's been kidnapped, and now she's going to find the person we know as the Quarter Killer. And he's not like a murderous person. He's not out here, but he only wants to be paid in quarters, and for some reason quarters still appeal to him, and it has something to do with these arcade things. But we don't really find out much about that. And then at the same time, he also has a handler. So as he's going out there, running through the streets, taking out people, he has someone sitting back on the mic, and it kind of gave me that Matrix vibe of every time that Neo went out there, that there was someone sitting at a console, just like almost kind of like that Oracle person you saw in like DC Comics and things like that. So you know, it was cool of a series. There's not enough meat yet to say whether I like it or not, but it's its first issue, so I'm looking, and because I have Comixology Unlimited, I have the ability to go ahead and get the second one for free. I don't have to pay for anything. So I think that's the upside of having Comixology Unlimited. Um, the art is cool. It makes me think of Scotty Young to an extent. It has this more cartoony feel to it. It's not taken too seriously and things like that. And I think that was a great job for this type of book. You know, having that retro vibe to it. I need to read issue 2 and 3. I'll probably give little small reviews about them in the future. But for a first issue, I don't think it's bad. I think there's not enough clarity for me yet in terms of what this book is all about, who's the big bad, and things like that. But um, hopefully, we'll get there later on. But it's a start, so definitely looking forward to more from that, and we'll
Yeah,
definitely see what happens.
yeah, the artwork looks pretty cool. I mean, it definitely, yeah, I totally agree. It definitely looks like that Scotty Young, type of artistic, cartoonish
Yeah, you can tell like they went
type
to
of
the same
vibe.
school. Yeah,
Yeah.
when it comes to the art.
Yeah, it definitely it looks dope. I also I think the way that the art is also it's got like this purplish like hue to it where it's almost kind of darker and not in
Hmm.
the sense that it's like ooh I'm in a dark mood type of
You don't feel like you're
vibe.
reading a Batman series.
Yeah, no, I think more it almost seems like you said like a Matrix like a like it's like a sort of like a tech like underground type of vibe to it. And you've got these guys using this different tech and hacking it and stuff, whatever. The way that it looks pretty dope, and uh, I thought that the artwork was pretty amazing for this. And like I said before, it doesn't have to be on the level of some of your top tier, artists with like Marvel or DC or Image, as long as it fits within the story. It's the cool thing about comic books. It's not all the same. When you read a comic book, you're consuming a written media and an artistic media, and those two things form the whole story. And I think that we have artwork like this with how it's written. I think it works real well. I think it flows real well, and it makes it worth a good read. I didn't really get too much into this one, but it's definitely something like you said with Comixology. It's something that'll as the series goes on will be opened up to people who subscribe to that to Comixology, and they'll be able to read it for free. And I never even realized that Comixology had their own content. I actually just found out that Audible has their own content that they create just for Audible. One of which happens to be a Stan Lee production. I can't remember what it's called, but it's something I've been wanting to listen to. It was one of his last projects, and so to see that Comixology does something like this too, I think is pretty cool. I think that gives artists and writers like this an opportunity to shine and get onto a platform where you might not be able to on different publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how much indie stuff I read in the past, but it's been kind of great to finally get into some really indie stuff, get some recommendations, and read some things I never read before. We need to go back and read your boy Kevin Gilroy and Ryan Benjamin's book, because there's very few webcomics that I've read recently, and so it'd be kind of cool to do a couple episodes of his and
Hmm.
give it a good discussion as well. Because once again, those are two brothers who've been doing big things in the industry for a while. Ryan Benjamin is of Wildstorm fame. Kevin Gilroy is in some of your well-known television and movie series out there. He's doing this thing, and so definitely need to get those guys the platform that they deserve. Or matter of fact, let's even say the flowers they deserve for some of the stuff that they've kind of put out there and things like that. But um, we're at that point. I had another book, but I didn't get to give a real breakdown, and I think it needs another issue or two before I can really talk about it, which is Dead Kings from Aftershock. And I'm interested to get more in that book. It has a Pacific Rim vibe to it, and even though I have it queued up, I will leave that for another time. But Mike, let's go ahead and get into our recommendations. So for me, my recommendations is, hey man, check out some of I have two, and then I think I'll leave another one for a video. But the two that I have is check out some of your old school TV shows or movies and stuff like that. Some of that nostalgia stuff, we kind of, we're in this time period now where there's so much. And like for example, I was listening to well, not listening, I was reading someone's review on The Mandalorian, and he was saying that the first episode didn't give him enough, and that's fine. It's his opinion, but what I really took from it is that, and what his response was to someone else commenting about it was, there was like, you're giving one episode to make and break a person to sit there and watch your program, because if not, they're going to move on to something else because there's just so much out there. And with that being said, there's so much out there when it comes to comics, when it comes to music, when it comes to TV. For me, like for example, on Apple Music, music comes out every Thursday night, which is Friday for the rest of the United States. And those first three albums are almost a go that they're going to get listened to. Them other ones, they are fighting for position if their name isn't Wu Tang, DMX, or Redman. So for anything else, there's got to be something that gives it a redeeming quality for me to watch, listen, or read. And the same thing comes with comic books. Like, we kind of joke all the time, but that cover, no matter how many times we've been kind of juked by that cover being one artist and the art inside being another one, that cover is what's going to say, hey, read me. And uh, it's that first initial appearance before you read something, because we might see an article on it, we might not. And a prime example is last week I went to my LCS and I was like, oh man, there's so many books here. I don't know what I'm going to read. But I started going off of covers and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that. And then some of it made me say, this is what I want for the indie stuff and things like that. So, super excited for to get more into the indie side of things. My recommendations is, like I said, try some of this nostalgia stuff. We kind of read it once and then we kind of throw it away, but there's some phenomenal stories to be said in that, even if they're not the greatest like they used to be. Sometimes it just takes you back to that memory. Like Wildcats 1 through 5 isn't the greatest storyline in the world, but it takes me back to my childhood when me, Michael, my other cousin Damien, my brother, we were all going to the comic book store, almost like I say about a quarterly basis, maybe a monthly basis, depending on when our parents could take us. I read Savage Dragon to this day because it reminds me of my brother. So it all gives you that particular feeling. So I definitely, that's my recommendation. So please go check those things out. Mike, what do you
Nice.
have?
So, for my recommendation, I am going to recommend the comic book Eight. Just to keep going with that one. Underwater Welder was a great book, but if you're looking for something with some action, some sci-fi, and some mystery to it, I would definitely recommend Eight. It was just a great book, and it leaves they set up volume one to keep you coming back for more. As far as what Rodney said, is checking out some of the vintage stuff. I'm going to throw out a quick DC or a quick Disney Plus show, which is Gargoyles. I love X-Men. I grew up watching X-Men. X-Men, however, has not aged well. It's just the animation and the how it was written. Uh, it just hasn't aged well to today. Whereas when you go to watch Gargoyles, it's still very relevant.
It's ahead of
Um,
his time. Ahead of
yeah,
his time.
very relevant, and not even just with how it's drawn or animated, but with the acting. You talk about Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis are in that show, and for those who are unnerdy like me, Jonathan Frakes played Captain Riker on Star Trek, and Marina Sirtis played the counselor on Star Trek. And of course, now I can't even think of her name, Counselor Troy. So they did a phenomenal job. And then the actors that portrayed the gargoyles did a great job. I can't think of what Goliath's name was. It's gonna drive me insane. But
Oh,
um,
that's my boy too. I can't think of it either.
was it Keith David?
It is Keith David.
All right, whew,
Keith
I
David,
redeemed myself.
the god when it
Yeah,
comes to voiceover.
Yeah,
Cause
yeah, I redeemed myself on that one.
yeah,
So I I think that yeah, check out Gargoyles. It looks really great. Um, it is allegedly uncensored, although from what I've read, it's not like it's gonna be anything crazy. You know, people's heads aren't getting lopped off or anything like that. But and the animation is very similar to what you see in Batman the animated series. But the animation, the acting, and even the sound, the score, the original score, the soundtrack for the show is amazing. And even if Gargoyles isn't your thing, check out Disney Plus to see what other shows might be on there. They don't pay us for any of this stuff, so it's not like I'm trying to hype up Disney Plus and they give any payoffs, although that would be kind of cool. Um, but yeah, definitely, while we have this time, because like Rodney said, we're living in a time where people are too nitpicky about what's coming out. People want to nitpick about whatever show or whatever movie, just be glad that it's out here because back when we were kids, it was slim pickings.
once it was over,
Very
it was
slim.
over. There's no, we're not going to
Yeah,
go. I don't know about your family, Mike, but my family was not going to go pick up 30 VCR tapes to have the series at home. Let alone even when you got
yep,
older, getting all those DVDs, like getting the Cowboy Bebop set was almost $100 back then.
right. Yeah. So imagine having to live in that time. Imagine, Rodney, you had talked about going to a store to rent uh, some videos. For you kids out there now, it's like, yo, back then we had to go to a store where people were to rent a big block of plastic that had this tape in it that you put into another big black box
Yeah,
and watch a very low, there was no 1080p back then, no 4K,
hmm
so we were working on that 480 was the highest
yeah,
resolution.
if that.
So at a 4:3 ratio. So what we got now, enjoy it. And check out the vintage stuff because there's some good stuff out there. Some of it's not so good. It's just like with the comic books. When you read an indie comic book, it's going to be hit or miss. It's either going to be really good or just absolutely terrible. But if you've got a subscription like Comixology, you can afford to experiment more, take more chances with what's out there. But like I said, check out Eight. It's a great comic book, and then also check out Gargoyles.
Mike, not well to kind of circle back for our Disney Plus conversation. A few quick questions. Um, Now that you've had a little bit of time with Disney Plus, do you see it like? Is there anything that is kind of pulled time? I know this is the first week, just and we're just talking here. Is there anything that it pulled away from you? Because, like for example, because there wasn't so much of the new content. I watched it for like a day or two, and then I kind of went back to my regularly scheduled program. What about you in your household?
It's an interesting question because we have so many streaming services now, and if you're a cord cutter, you're probably starting to get a little frustrated because what draws you into all these streaming services is original content. And you don't want to just have to feel that you have to get a streaming service just because of that one channel's or that one service's original content. So with that said, uh, I have Hulu, I have Netflix, I have CBS All Access, and I have Amazon Prime. And I will say that I'm honestly thinking about leaving Netflix, just because there's not really anything that I really watch on there anymore. Uh, I will wait for something like Stranger Things to come back out, but other than that, there's not really anything tying me back to Netflix. Hulu is an interesting proposition because Hulu's a part of Disney. Um, so I don't foresee myself leaving that. CBS All Access, I'm tied to it because of Star Trek. I'm tied to it. Uh, but then you have things like Amazon Prime Video. Uh, that's just something that is always going to stay there just because I have Amazon Prime. It comes with the service. That's a no-brainer. Um, so, is there something that Disney is doing extremely right that will make me not want to go to anybody else? Yeah, I mean, and as they continue to expand their library, what I'm really interested to see is if they stay true to their word of keeping what they add on their library at all times and not doing like what Netflix does and have a rotation,
I was gonna say like
you know?
DC did, because DC at one time they kind of came through and DC happened was like, hey, we got all your movies, and then they were like, guess what? They're leaving next month, and then we were
Yeah.
kind of like, yo, what the hell? I thought everything was staying here. Do you think HBO Max will kind of skew DC universe? I know we talked about this before. In all honesty, I'm trying to fill up like another 10 minutes of time just so that I can say we did a minute 30. I mean, an hour 30. But do you think, like, for example, if the DC Universe app moves completely over to HBO Max, will that make you move over? Or, if they say we're going to take all the media over here, but the comics are going to stay on DC Universe, would you would you still continue to use would you go to HBO Max for the TV shows, or would you just kind of be like, you know what, I'm out of the game for now?
I gotta say that I really don't. I haven't been on DC Universe in a minute for the TV shows. Now, I still read my comics on there. I'm still going through the 52 uh series that ran a year, but I haven't watched the shows. I've given up on Titans. Um, and every time I see something new about Titans, I'm glad I've given up on it because it just seems like it's just getting like too far fetched. Uh, Although I am interested because now I just saw that they're bringing Batman into it,
Mm-hmm.
an older Batman. So, but the picture I saw, I was like, I don't know. Um, and then as far as Young Justice goes, I've always been a big fan of Young Justice, but even that's kind of gone off the rails. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I think if it gets eventually moved over to HBO Max, I mean, it's got a lot to offer. And especially for somebody who hasn't watched a lot of HBO content over the years, I finally, not now, but, a few years ago, I finally watched The Wire, and The Wire had been out for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just finally watched it and it was amazing. And I was like, oh my God, what did I miss? So,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. That's it. I am a cord cutter, so I don't have cable TV. Uh, but it's going to get to the point where um, I'll have to make some decisions. I don't watch a lot of. I'm very selective with what I watch, and I don't watch. In my household we don't watch a lot of TV. We don't have a lot of screen time, and when we do, uh, to find common ground. So if it's just adult time and we're watching shows, it's gonna be more stuff like you know uh, uh, the SWAT show or FBI or Criminal Minds or something like that. Although we have been watching, speaking of former Marvel actors, we have been watching on CBS. Uh, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the name of the show. All Rise,
Mm.
which stars our girl from Luke
Simone
Cage.
Missick. Yeah, she played
Yes. So
like, dang, now Misty Knight. She played Misty
Misty
Knight.
Knight.
Yeah.
Yep. So we have been watching that show, and it's weird because her character in that show versus her character in Luke Cage are complete opposites,
Yeah.
and it's pretty cool. Then we also watch Evil, which has Luke Cage in there. Um, but and it's interesting because his character is not so far off from what he played in Luke Cage, just not a guy who beats up everybody, but it is a very good show.
Right.
So those are the kind of shows that we're watching now. There are shows that I'm trying to catch up on, like Arrow, just because I want to see what's up with this Infinite Crisis. But that's going to be like whenever I can do it, I can do it. So I don't think there's anything that you know. As long as I can still read the comics, I'll be fine.
Okay.
I'll be fine. I'm not too worried about going over to HBO Max to catch the DC shows. That's not the main draw for me right now. Whereas for Disney Plus, the main draw for me is to watch those Marvel shows. Um, because I know that those are going to be entertaining. The DC ones, it's kind of like you can take a chance and see what happens, roll the dice.
Yeah.
they did have some good shows. Uh, Swamp Thing looked like it was going to be a good show. It looked like it had potential. And then the one before that with the
Doom
group, I
Patrol.
can't think of it. Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol looked good. I was maybe 5, 6 episodes into that, and that looked pretty good. So, but it wasn't enough to keep me in.
Yeah.
Wasn't enough to keep me in. It didn't have the budget that Disney and Marvel have. Because if you, if you haven't seen The Mandalorian, it's on that AAA movie budget right now.
Yeah.
Okay, they spared no expense. Like it was full on out. Had I told you it was not a TV show, you would have thought it was a movie when you started watching it. That's how great the budget is for that one. DC does not have that budget right now, and I don't know if it will make a difference. Uh, Marvel also has all the talent where it comes to writing these shows and directing them. DC is kind of hit or miss. So as long as I get to read my comic books, I'm fine with just if DC Universe just becomes like another Marvel Unlimited where it's just the comic books, I'll be fine with that.
Hmm.
And I'll skip the whole HBO Max thing just because it's not a priority for me right now. I have Amazon Prime. I might get rid of Netflix, especially because Amazon Prime has like The Boys and Jack Ryan, and then even the sci-fi show
Expanse.
Expanse. So uh, I don't think there's anything that HBO Max has for me that's gonna make me be like, I have to get that. I just, as long as the comic book library does not go away, whether it's on HBO Max or DC Universe, that'd be my only draw.
Yeah. So I watch HBO for The Watchmen and Westworld, and there's a few handful other series out there that I watch it for. But I like having HBO Go. As as for someone who doesn't necessarily watch the Arrowverse at this moment, I would probably just buy it off of Apple TV. I was going to buy a season of it, then go to another streaming service, just because at least then I own it compared to, and then I can kind of watch it in my time. Then just something weird going on contractually, and then you kind of like caught in the sauce of that one. Yeah, like you said, Jack Ryan was fantastic. I can't wait to watch season two. I haven't watched that yet. Another one, Amazon Prime, that I watch is called Humans. So I'm think season three started, so I'm dearly behind on that. But more than anything, like I'm not over yet over Teen Titans and Young Justice. The biggest thing is once again catalogs are too large. Everyone's given a budget on a TV show. More things keep on
Hmm.
coming out there. Plus, there's a lot of movies that are still out there that are coming out soon that I want to see, haven't seen yet, or right around the corner. Like the Last Jedi will be here before we know it. And then there's only so much time in the day that I can, like me and my wife have completely different ideals as far as what we watch on television. So we're not necessarily both sitting in the same TV watching the same thing, but
Mm.
some of the times is I'm like you said, reading comic books, listening to music, surfing the net, depending on what's going on. I'm not necessarily always putting on a TV show where I need to really study the whole script to make sure I understand it, so that I can get the full pure view of what's going on. Sometimes it's nothing better than putting Bob's Burger on in the background and just letting it play, knowing I don't have to
Right,
give it another thought or two. Um,
right, yeah. Dre brought up a good point.
mhm.
I was just reading his comments. Green Lantern for HBO Max. And then there's, of course, Adam Strange is coming to that. There's some other shows coming to
Yeah.
that. Uh, Even with Green Lantern coming to HBO Max, I still don't think that's enough of a, like, gotcha, I
That
gotcha,
trailer got to be
to
fire.
sign up
That
for it.
trailer got to be fire.
Right. It's got to
Yeah.
be. It's got to make me forget about Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern.
Yeah.
It's
I won't say all that, but it just got to be fire. If it's just another CW trailer,
Oh no, it's got to make me forget about Ryan Reynolds. I've got to be like, man, I don't even remember what happened with that.
yeah.
Like, it's got to be like you said, it really does have to be fire. Like, it's got to be, and it's got to have that Mandalorian budget.
Mm.
Like you said, I don't know if I could watch it if it's a CW budget.
Well, you know what? I don't got a problem with a CW budget. I have a problem with a CW story. Because I
Right,
don't, I
right, right,
don't,
right.
I don't want to ever make it seem like, cause like, I mean, I hate to say it, Mandalorian's cool, but I'm still kind of like, all right. I don't know. It didn't captivate me enough to make me to watch it as soon as the next episode drops. But I'm not
Hmm.
that big of a Star Wars guy. In the terms of like, I know how you are, and a few guys that I know, right? But the to me the bigger thing is that um, I need something other than you kind of put the most prettiest face in front of the camera, and then let's say, hey, this is our show.
Right,
I
it's the cookie cutter template,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that
absolutely.
that CW
Yeah,
Arrowverse, that almost, it's that Smallville template.
yeah,
That's all it
yeah.
is. It's a Smallville
But then,
template,
but then, like
like you
even
said.
Drake's mentioned in the comments, if it's anything like if they give it the same type of treatment like they gave Watchmen or something like that, that could, that would definitely change the appeal, or Westworld, or any of those other things. If it's going to be a HBO Max original,
I
um,
mean, why not? It's HBO, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But once again, why not? It's HBO. Let's be clear. HBO also has thrown some duds out there too. So so it's one of those things we're just gonna have to play that wait and see approach. But um, yeah. So that's been an hour 30. So I think we can shut this bad boy down. Dre, thank you so much for checking in. Also, thank you for subscribing once again, y'all. If you get an opportunity, Dre, please drop a link for everybody here. But check out the Facilitator podcast. They do a lot of the local, and they're doing all the. I think they're doing a lot of football stuff. I really would love to hear your things about the NBA. My boy Mello is back in the game, baby, and so you know definitely check him out. Come check out the Nation 80s Comic Podcast. Subscribe, give us a like,
Check
put a
out Dre.
comment
Don't
down.
check out Bello.
What's that?
Check out Dre. Don't check out Bello. Bello's
Anyway,
garbage.
check out Carmelo Anthony when you get opportunity, and all these other things. So once again, thank you everybody for coming to the Nation 80s Podcast. This is episode 31. See you next week when we get on to the Marvel stuff, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.